Army Brats, Chapter 20. And I believe there are only 24 chapters, so we are almost done. And I want to see what's going to happen. Chapter 20. Charlotte flew after Tom, rounded the corner, and saw the man in brown grab Rosie and lift her up. "Stop!" Tom was shouting, waving his arms. "Put her down!" Charlotte screeched, right on his heels and flailing her arms just as wildly. The man looked at Tom and Charlotte as they stormed up to him. "I just don't want her to hurt herself," he said, setting Rosie gently down and lifting the goggles off her face and onto her head. Rosie looked around, then hugged Tom tight. Charlotte hugged them both. "He almost got me," Rosie said, looking up at Charlotte and Tom with big eyes. "You're safe now," Tom assured her, giving the man a fierce glare in case he had any ideas. Charlotte gave the man her own glare, her arm around her sister. He lifted up his hands. "She could have tripped over a root or run into a tree with her face covered like that," he said. "I didn't want that to happen." Charlotte wasn't quite sure what to say or what to make of the man up close. Somehow he wasn't so sinister in the light of day. His brown eyes were kind, and they twinkled a bit as he smiled again. Plus, what he said was true. They were at the edge of the wooded area, and Rosie actually could have hurt herself. "Thanks, I guess," she said finally. "So, are you the ghosts who were hanging around here the other day, spooking me when I was trying to work?" the man asked, "because I was beginning to think this place was haunted." "We're spies, not ghosts," Rosie said. She had let go of her brother and sister and seemed ready to reclaim her dignity. "Spies, right," the man said knowingly. "So have you figured out what we're doing here?" "You're a dog napper, and you stole Buddy," Rosie said, now fully recovered, her eyes flashing with accusation. "I saw him in the basement, so don't try to deny it." Charlotte gasped as the news that Buddy was actually there in the basement. Rosie had been right about the dogs all along. If Buddy is one of our former MWDs, he might be down in the kennel with the other dogs, the man said. "But I can promise you that no dog in this facility was kidnapped or dognapped." "So then, what is Buddy doing here?" Rosie asked, hands on her hips. "Because we saw cages and meat and you carrying a weapon. Those are very serious things." Charlotte was beginning to wish her sister had been slightly more traumatized by her scare so that she'd stop spilling everything. The man's forehead crinkled. "A weapon?" "It was a big stick, like a bat, with wire on it," Charlotte exclaimed. The memory of it made the man seem slightly more threatening. The man's face stayed scrunched in thought for another moment, but then he grinned. "Oh, you must mean the heel stick," he said. "It's not wire at the end. It's usually just a leather strap to make it easier to carry." Charlotte's cheeks warmed at that. How could she have made such a rookie mistake, though it had been a dark and rainy night? "We use the heel sticks to teach the dogs the new skills they'll need," the man went on. "I'm Danny Scatglove, by the way, head dog trainer and soon-to-be Army officer." Charlotte remembered that sometimes civilians who worked for the Army were given officer status if they had skills to offer up. Apparently, dog training skills had landed Mr. Scatglove here. That explained his heavy brown jacket, too. Charlotte knew that dog trainers had to keep themselves well padded. The Baileys introduced themselves. "Can you tell us why they need new skills?" Charlotte asked, after they'd finished shaking hands. "I can indeed," Mr. Scatglove said. "Do you kids know what MWDs are?" "Military working dogs," Rosie said quickly. "They help GIs out in the field." "That's exactly right," Mr. Scatglove said, nodding. "And this is the post's inaugural pilot program to retrain military working dogs so that they can be adopted into civilian families." Rosie jumped up and down. "So you're helping Buddy find a home?" she exclaimed. "Exactly," Mr. Scatglove said, his eyes bright. "We're helping all these dogs find homes. They did their time serving their country. but suffered injuries that will prevent them from going back out in the field. So they're hurt? Rosie asked, a crease appearing on her forehead. We just turned the upstairs into a veterinary clinic to help patch them up, Mr. Scatglove said. Now Charlotte understood the syringes and the metal tools. They were medical supplies, and the meat, of course, was just dog food. And then once the dogs are ready, they come on down to the basement, and we begin preparing them for their new lives as pets. I bet they'll like their new lives, Charlotte said, thinking of how Cupcake had blossomed in her home after they'd rescued her. They'll be spoiled rotten. Mr. Skakov smiled. That's the plan, he said. We have 5 dogs so far, and another 4 arriving later this week, now that we're really up and running. Tom was frowning slightly. Why don't their handlers adopt them, he asked. Many times that's exactly what happens, he said, rubbing his head for a moment. And we actually have a dog upstairs at the veterinary facility now waiting for his handler to get back from the hospital in Germany. But in other cases, if the dog comes home early due to an injury, the handler starts over with a new dog. Or sometimes a handler is unable to take the dog in after he or she completes their tour of duty. He cleared his throat, and Charlotte realized there was another reason a handler might not adopt a dog, because the handler did not make it home. Oh, that's sad. It was the reality, though, that no military family ever wanted to think about, and Charlotte was glad when Tom changed the subject. Why was everything top secret, he asked. We needed the dogs to be able to arrive here in complete quiet, Mr. Scatglove said seriously. After what they've seen in military zones, they startle easily and can have issues with crowds. This is a whole new setting for them, and we wanted them to feel as safe as possible during the transition time. That all made sense, and finally, the mystery was solved. There was just one last thing that concerned Charlotte. I hope we didn't bother the dogs when we came and looked around. Mr. Scatglove shook his head. No harm done, he assured them. In fact, as of this morning, they are officially cleared for visitors, and part of their training is exposing them to kids. So I wonder if you 3 would be willing to help out and come downstairs now to play with them. That's the end of chapter 20, and I'll see you soon for chapter 21. Mystery solved. Let's see what happens next.